Well, thank you, Steve. And this is fascinating. I didn't realize I was coming up to make a speech. But however, here I am, and I'm seldom at a loss for words. So I want to start off by saying that the human rights, the non-human rights movement, I just congratulate you because you had a really long, hard fight, and you've still got a long way to go. Even human rights are violated every day all around the world. But we have to go on fighting for the things we believe in, making small steps and celebrating each victory as it comes along. When I first began studying chimpanzees back in 1960, nobody knew anything about their behavior in the wild, at least nobody from the Western world. And so everything I saw was new and exciting. And yes, it wasn't well received by the scientific world in the UK because, well, I was just a girl, I hadn't been to college, and why should they believe me when I talked about chimpanzees using and making tools? Why should they believe me when I talked about chimpanzees having a kind of primitive warfare? Because back then, science wasn't thinking in those terms. But Louis Leakey picked me specifically because I hadn't been to university. He said, I want somebody whose mind is uncluttered with the reductionist thinking of the science of the day. And so I was the perfect person for him to choose with my long childhood love of animals. I was with the chimpanzees about 2 years when I had a letter from Louis Leakey saying, Jane, I won't always be around to get money for you. You have to stand on your own feet. And for that, you need a degree. He said, we don't have time for you to mess about with a BA. I've got you a place in Cambridge University in England to study ethology, to do a PhD. Well, I didn't even know what ethology was, and there was no Googling or anything like that in those days. Of course, it just means animal behavior. I have a feeling that scientists like to hide behind long words. It makes them feel very important. Because we could just as well say animal behavior, but no, it's ethology. And actually, we can do the same ethology on human beings. When I got to Cambridge, being nervous, can you imagine how I felt when so many of these erudite professors told me I'd done everything wrong? Jane, you shouldn't have given the chimpanzees names. They should have had numbers. That's scientific. You can't talk about them having personalities, minds capable of solving problems. You certainly can't talk about them having emotions. As you said, this is the height of anthropomorphism, ascribing human characteristics to non-human animals. Heresy. In previous centuries, I might have been burned as a witch, I suppose. However, fortunately, when I was young, I had a wonderful teacher, a teacher who taught me that in this respect anyway, these erudite professors were totally, completely wrong. And that teacher was my dog, Rusty. You can't share your life with a dog, a cat, a horse, a pig, a bird, I don't care what it is, and not know that, of course, we are not the only beings with personalities, minds, and emotions, and we are part of and not separated from the rest of the animal kingdom. So eventually Eventually I got my PhD, and here I want to give a big thank you to the chimpanzees. Because they're so like us biologically, because we share something like 98.6% of the composition of our DNA with chimpanzees, because there are similarities in the immune system and the composition of the blood and the anatomy of the brain, because they are our closest living relatives on this planet biologically. That means that it was easier to persuade these rigid scientists that there are also these striking similarities in behavior, striking similarities in the psychology. And so gradually science came out of this rigid way of thinking. And now, for a young student, wanting to study animal behavior. I believe this is the most exciting time in my life because you can study animal personality. I couldn't have because it didn't exist. You can study animal emotions. You can study certainly animal intellect. Animal intelligence is now something that is a hot topic. And Steve has talked about elephant, I guess you did too, elephants and whales and dolphins. But we know so much now about animal intelligence. And I remember when the first experiments on birds, it was crows actually, came out into the world. These were 2 Caledonian crows being studied in New Zealand, and the reports came out that these birds were able to use and make tools, something that at one time only humans were thought to have that capability. It was the breakthrough observation for me that chimpanzees used and made tools. It was the observation that made National Geographic come in with funding, support, and sending a photographer and filmmaker, Hugo van Lauwing, to record what I was observing, to take this out into the world. So the scientists had to start believing. Chimps do use and make tools. Here's the evidence. But if you'd gone to pygmies out in the rainforest, they could have told you, long before I was there, of course chimpanzees use and make tools. But Western science has been so arrogant. And I again say I want to thank the chimpanzees for helping to break that mold. The Caledonian crows, they had a very simple task. There was, I can't remember what it was, but it was a glass tube, a peanut, that's right, a glass tube with a peanut at the bottom. And they were given a wire with a little kind of hook thing, and they found it very easy to hook out the peanut. But then one day, accidentally, not planned, the hook broke off. And so now you've got a piece of straight wire. Now, I don't know how long the frustrated stabbing went on. But finally, one of the crows with beak and foot bent a hook and got out the peanut. And, oh, said the scientist, well, this is just an accident. I'm not quite sure how it's an accident when you bend a hook with beak and foot, but anyway, the same thing happened again and again. So then say the skeptics, well, yes, but it's only one of the 2 birds, so clearly it's an aberrant bird. So why was only one bird making tools to hook out the peanut? Because that was the female, and every time she hooked out a peanut, the male took it. So the motto is, if you have a wife, why bother to make a tool? So at any rate, we now know that, and if you haven't seen this, do look it up because it's absolutely amazing. It's a crow, and I can't remember where the work was done, but it's a crow, and he's been taught 7 different ways of getting different tools. So in some cases you press a lever and you get out a long stick. In some cases you drop a stone into a glass of water which makes the peanut float to the top so you can reach it. But this was the first time on this piece of video that the bird has been presented with all 7 tasks, and to get the reward he's got to work out the order in which you get the different tools for the different purposes. And he did it quicker than a human child of 5. And in many ways, birds are smarter even than chimpanzees. And yet, how long have we talked about the bird brain? Oh, he's got a bird brain, she's got a bird brain. You know, they're stupid people. Birds are smart. And I won't go on and on, but I'll tell you one more story about a bird. And this is a parrot. And we shouldn't have parrots as pets any more than we should have chimps as pets. But, you know, there are many people who've had parrots. And this woman who lives in the Bronx had always loved birds. And so she got a captive bred 4-month-old African grey parrot. And I heard about this parrot. I wanted to go and see the parrot because I'd heard amazing things. She decided when you have a baby, you don't hold up a pencil and when the baby finally repeats pencil, give the baby a reward. You just talk to the baby. So she talked to this bird, Nkisi. And when she knew I was coming to visit him, he was 8 years old, and she'd been showing him videos and things like that. So I walk into the room. She's not a scientist, by the way, she's a jeweler. And Nkisi is up on top of his very large cage, not in it. He likes to have it if he wants a home, but he's on top of it. And I walk in, I'm feeling a bit silly, and I look up at this little person up there, and I say, "Oh, hello, Kisi. I've heard so much about you. How nice to meet you." And he looks down, he says, "That's Jane. Got a chimp?" And then Amy, his partner, she's very emotional, she's very spiritual, and she loves animals. And on this occasion, she tried to rescue an iguana from a pet shop, but it died anyway, and she's crying. And the lizard is laid out on the ground with a long box. It's going to be buried, and she's lit candles, and she's got sweetgrass burning. And Kisi, who as a child, when he was young, he'd had a lot of toys. You press a button and he could chase the little thing across the ground. He had a board, you pressed the button A, and it would say A is for apple. She thought he'd learn quicker that way. So anyway, he comes over and looks at this situation, and he says, "Try a new battery." I mean, wow. So there's something else I'd love you to look up. I spend a lot of time trying to explain to people that the animals that are bred for food, that are kept in these horrendous, horrendous situations in the factory farms. And if you've never been to one, I advise you not to, because it gives you nightmares and you can't sleep. But there's, if you Google, not Picasso, but Picasso, you know, not the artist Picasso, but Picasso. There's a woman in Cape Town, and she has a little sanctuary for rescued farm animals, and the truck taking them to slaughter broke down, and this pig was rescued. Female, large, one of these large factory farm pigs. And the woman is an artist, and she noticed this pig was really interested in when she was painting. So one day she put up her canvas, and she gave the pig a paintbrush. And Google it and you'll see, it's amazing. This pig loves to paint. And when she sees a paintbrush, she gets all excited, and she's making piggy grunting noises, and she's running from the shed across the grass, and she's painting like this. She's actually making the rooting movements that a pig makes. And she'll dip the brush into a different color, and she very often will sign the painting with her snout, which she's dipped into some color. Well, actually, I'm a proud owner of a painting about this big. Her owner says she paints best when there's a beautiful view. So she's driven out so that they can look out over Table Mountain, so that the pig can have a nice view while she paints her paintings, and they're selling for $500. So the point I want to make is that these animals, which some people think, well, because they're bred for food, they're just things, they actually have personalities. They have feelings. If they're allowed to, they form close bonds with their young and their brothers and sisters and friends. And there's so much information out there now on things that would never have been believed by science a few years ago. That's why I say it's such an exciting time for young people today. And by the way, if you're interested in art, there's a painting horse. The parrot Kisi has done a beautiful drawing for me. There's a painting rhino. She started off painting with that long upper lip, the black rhino, but now she's graduated to having a brush, and she makes paintings. I'm told there's a painting giraffe. I didn't know about that. There's a painting dog. And if you are really interested, you can Google dog painting the name Trump and see what happens. At any rate, so congratulations on the work that you're doing and that you continue to do, and don't give up. And I'm sort of working from the opposite side, helping people to understand and feel in their hearts that these animals are deserving of personhood. So thank you all for listening to me.